My name is Vanessa, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm here to speak to my experiences with food security and food justice issues in Kitchener-Waterloo. And I'll also share a little bit about my urban planning research, which was on food gentrification in the context of downtown Kitchener. And there's a lot there, but I thought I'd focus on my paper published with Social Science and Medicine. And this is an adaptation of one of my manuscripts titled Life Stories of Food Agency, Health and Resilience in a Rapidly Gentrifying Urban Center, building a multidimensional concept of food access. So the purpose of this study was to explore relationships between food security, health, and gentrification through a case study in Kitchener. So I thought I'd start with defining food security or attempting to. So I think it's important to see it as a context and culturally specific concept. You often hear about these different realms of availability, access, and use. And one kind of holistic definition was put forth by Food Secure Canada in 2004, which is the assurance that all people at all times have both the physical and economic access to the food they need for an active, healthy life. It means that the food itself is safe, nutritionally adequate, culturally appropriate, and that this food be obtained in a way that upholds basic human dignity. Yeah, and then I've been throwing around this term gentrification, which might not be familiar for everyone. It's very common in planning circles these days, especially in the context of Waterloo Region, which is changing so quickly. Gentrification is a complex, deliberate phenomenon intended to change the urban environment. Typically resulting in the inmoving of wealthier populations who displace vulnerable residents. Yeah, and my study looked at the concept of food gentrification, which is kind of a newer concept and not even very present in scholarship very much at all. But I was really interested in intersections between food and gentrification and kind of drew from the work of Mikki Kendall, who's a Chicago-based scholar and activist. And she describes food gentrification as a process of elevating previously affordable foods or even staple ingredients to a condition of higher symbolic or aesthetic value and cost, and especially for racialized communities. So this is a much newer concept, not always explicitly referenced, but I did a bit of a literature review to try and find studies that made some of those connections that almost alluded to the concept. So a lot of the literature draws from green gentrification philosophies or eco gentrification you might have heard of, and greenwashing is a common term you might have heard of. And then also food environment and race studies. I basically put forth that food gentrification is a relevant concept and phenomenon for downtown Kitchener, especially due to redevelopment, housing pressures, and a loss of food charities observed by residents. And then we also saw discussions of food being gentrified, as it was kind of brought up by Mikki Kendall, people seeing the symbolic elevation of foods that were previously affordable, maybe when they were growing up in the city, and especially critical of like the growing foodie scenes and how they feel excluded from these activities in various ways. And what we saw in response was participants managing their food needs in really creative and resourceful ways. I basically wanted to emphasize that geographic planning solutions will not be enough on their own to address the food security needs of residents. And then something that you see coming from kind of higher level key informants is suggestions of employing like cooking classes or like educating people more, which just almost devalues the deep knowledge that people already carry around food resources, and sort of underplays the need for really systemic changes to be employed. So my study kind of encouraged a need to address living wages and a transformation in social assistance. And from suggestions from the residents, a lot of people wanted to see social justice principles integrated into community food work, more culturally specific food policies in order to address rising costs of cultural foods. And I also really pushed for improved data on food security in general. Specifically, thought there was room to engage with residents who have faced forced relocations, because the health impacts of place disruption can be really serious. And also to engage with racialized food insecure folks, because my study and many others show that they face unique circumstances when experiencing food scarcity. Yeah, so fundamentally it's kind of looking at issues within capitalist distribution systems and looking to create more sort of just modes of exchange, I guess.